it going. So, ladies, thank y'all for joining. We wanted to talk today about what's been going on in the news with Jess Hilarious and Loren Lorosa. We were looking at it over the last week and just kind of seeing Jess, she went live just talking about her transition back to work. Wasn't what she expected.
Mhm.
And she felt a type of way about it. And Loren was on set with them, and she was taking up space during Jess's segment in particular. And they had a conversation on the Breakfast Club about it and talked about it. And so we thought this would be a good topic to come on and just discuss with you all and get your perspectives on, Black women in the workplace, and are we supporting each other? What are those relationships looking like? And how did y'all really feel about what's going on with the two of them? So, Shalonvia, Tosh, do y'all have any thoughts, comments
Of
about
course.
it? Yeah, I know you do, sis. I know you
Jump
do.
in, sis.
Are
Yeah.
y'all
Yeah.
familiar with it? Let us know if y'all are familiar with what's been going on too.
So, of course, I'm typically out of the loop with a lot of the social media buzz. So you had to bring me up to speed, and I did some quick research. But, I think that when we look at these types of dynamics, we have to be cautious to not make blanketed assumptions about how everything happened. And I think that there was just a lot of assumption throughout the entire set of interactions. Assuming what people's intentions were and what support was or wasn't present without having had enough relevant discussion, at least seemingly, to to be able to point to how folks really felt. And I
Yeah.
think that there was just a heightened amount of emotion that really involved that caused everybody that was involved to get out of sorts. And I think it made it for an uncomfortable work environment.
Yeah, I felt like the conversations or the emotions that were running high could have just been, transitioning back to work after you've had a baby is hard enough, right? Trying to
Right.
just readjust, figure out what your place and space is. You're balancing family, you're balancing your job, and you come in and it looks different, right? It feels a little
Mhm.
bit different. And you may be struggling with postpartum or anything like that, right? So I felt like there were some underlying issues there too, just in maybe the way that they communicated to her what was going to happen when she came back. It sounded like it wasn't clear. What y'all think?
Yeah, yeah. I don't follow them. The thing is that caught my attention was that I saw two black women on the Breakfast Club. I thought that was cool. So when I saw all of the stuff going down between them, just the commentary, I was just like, oh no. So that's really what caught my attention, and I stopped on the video to kind of dig in. But from what I can gather, from what I saw, I think it's a couple of things. One, the going through pregnancy recently and getting back to work, it's a lot mentally, and just that emotional state that you're in during that time, um, it can be overwhelming. And I think just could have communicated in a different way, preferably not in public, to resolve the situation. That's what I wish would have happened, because once social media gets a hold of it, it just blows it out of proportion. And she was just really concerned about the comments, like the 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 video that I saw. She just kept going back to like the people in the comments, the people in the comments, and I think that was like that had a hold on her to the point to where I don't know that she was even trying. I don't think she was listening or thinking rationally after that. She was just so concerned about social media and the comments. Like my concern for her is really what how she supported coming from having a baby. The whole like that piece for me is critical and important.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think when I was when you think about it, like social media, so many things are aired out on social media, and people are not having real conversations sometimes,
Hmm.
and in the background. right? And so we vent to social media, and it just depends on, what you're used to. Just grew up in the entertainment industry, it seems like, and that's something she's used to doing, right? Is using that platform to communicate. Whereas other people may not normally use that platform to communicate. So I wonder if that played a part in it too. Or again, she was just emotional and that was the way that she felt, was the only way to get people's attention, because she may have tried to have conversations in the background and felt like nobody was listening.
Yeah. The thing about social media though is that digital footprint is there forever. Like that's the
Hmm.
thing that I try to remember when I want to vent to a friend off, on the phone or something, because you
Yeah.
can't go back from that.
Yeah. What were you gonna say,
Did
Shalonvia?
we lose Shalonvia?
Did we lose it? It keeps kicking it out for some reason. You there, sis?
I am back. It doesn't want me to stay.
I don't know if you could hear what we were saying. What were your thoughts about social media?
Yeah, I think that from a devil's advocate perspective, what if she did want it to be that way? Like you said, she came up in her career from a social media perspective,
Mm-hmm.
whereas Lauren, from what I understand, came up from a producer standpoint. So she worked with TMZ or something to that effect. So she just has a totally different background. So her relationship with kind of forward facing things was more from a producer standpoint, whereas Jess was built on going to social media to get the attention, to get the acknowledgement, the recognition. So I think that this is maybe not really foreign to her to consider using her social media platform to air out grievances or celebrate or anything else, because that's just been her baseline. Whereas, like you said, Tosh, that we would speak to our friends because that's how we came up, right? Like, so using
Mm-hmm.
a totally different
Hmm.
way of communication impacts the way that you're going to handle things under pressure and stress. You're going to kind of go
Hmm.
to the stuff that is most familiar. I would assume. Again,
Mm-hmm.
it could have all been a ploy. Who knows what the truth is behind all of it.
Yeah. And like Ruby said, her dad was a comedian, and so that may be, just what she's used to, right? Talking out publicly, you're in the public eye. But also, she may not have been getting the answers that she was looking for from higher ups. And it's like, how do you have those conversations? How do you discuss that?
Hmm.
Especially when you come back from having a baby, right? You're trying to be secure in your job, making sure you can provide for your baby. But on the flip hand, she could be sabotaging her bag by coming out and talking,
Absolutely.
and saying something, and it may make them upset or piss them off or not, right? It's entertainment. Maybe they're used to the drama and that's fine. But I was looking at it like, sis, secure your bag, right? Make sure you
Right.
have it set.
And her reputation overall, because maybe it might be fine with Charlemagne and Envy, right? But
Hmm.
maybe someone else, when she's ready to advance her career in some other way, people may be hesitant, to work with her because of the way that she's behaved. I don't know all the details about it, but this makes me think of like Monique, the
Mm-hmm.
comedian and
Hmm.
actress. And so
Hmm.
she's really been blackballed in a lot of spaces for ruffling people's feathers and seemingly being difficult to work with.
Hmm.
So, sometimes we might push the envelope too far and end up
Hmm.
pitting ourselves against the very people that we want to utilize for clout or
Hmm.
advancement or opportunities, because now they don't want to work with us anymore.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
sad because Monique is very talented,
I
right?
agree. Yeah.
So is Jess. Jess is very, she's funny. Like I enjoy watching her. And Loren is equally, talented, right? So these are qualified women, talented women that have a platform, that they all belong. There's enough room to see both of them win, right? Like Ruby's saying, it's enough room for both of them, to shine. And I just think it's good. It would be good for them to have had the conversation amongst themselves about maybe
Mhm.
collectively going together and say, hey, there is enough space for both of us. Sometimes we don't see ourselves, we just see there's only one spot. In this case, there potentially were two. And I think they could have capitalized on that,
Right.
right? To say, okay, there's two of us in the room. How do we keep this going? How do we adjust? Do we change Jess with the mess, or do we add Loren with the looks, or Loren, whatever, right?
Right. Right.
Um, there's enough room. So
I think that
I agree.
there is too. I think that it moved really fast. Just from what I could
It
consume,
did.
it seemed like, she returned and maybe there wasn't enough foresight as to what it would look like. And then, and then it just starts unfolding and now everybody's just there, not
Mm-hmm.
knowing where everybody sits and what role they have. And I think that that happens in a lot of settings when there's a differentiation of roles and responsibilities for a quick moment. Somebody's leaving, i.e. having a baby. We know that you're going to have the baby, but we don't necessarily know when you're going to leave and what that's going to look like. And so
Mm-hmm.
it may have ended up being a situation where they hadn't given enough consideration to the next steps after she returned, just enough to
Mm-hmm.
get through this bump in the road. She's gone right now. This
Mhm.
is the person that fills the gap, not looking at the other side of it.
Yeah.
And this, that piece for me is very concerning because as women, we should not have to worry about our job and if it will be there when we come back from having a baby. Having a baby is providing a joy to the world. Like, this is something like only
Mm-hmm.
women can carry babies, but yet we're treated, it's not valued,
Mm,
and I,
Yeah.
I'm really concerned about what the workforce will look like in the future as a lot of our protections unravel. And I was fortunate to have 4 months off of work when I had my child. And when I came back, there was no question about what I would be doing. Like, I was able to roll right back into my role and not worry about if my job would be there. And I feel like all women deserve that. They deserve the protection to start a family and not have to worry about what's going to happen when I get back. And for her, she's in a different industry, the entertainment industry. I understand it's different, but yet I feel like she still deserves that. She deserves the space to start a family without worrying about that.
Mm-hmm.
right. Do y'all
Do
think
you?
that she wasn't given an opportunity to fully return?
I see.
Like that there
That piece
wasn't
I don't
security?
know, but I feel like some of what it's like when you come back and then somebody's still there who you thought was like a temporary situation. Like, to me, like, that should have been worked out before she came back, if that was the case. Like, if they were
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, we're feeling Lauren, she's doing a good job and we want to keep her on the show, I feel like that could have been discussed before her first day back. And it could have been. Again, this is speculation, we're getting this from social media, but it seems like it wasn't. And so, going back to your point, Shalonvia, where you were saying the foresight, it's like all companies should have the foresight to know to plan around women in that sense of if someone's going on maternity leave. I just think it should just be more foresight like that. She
Yeah.
deserved that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it sounded like they had conversations, and I was wondering whether she didn't listen to some of it because she was in an emotional state, that maybe some of it she just wasn't receiving, right? Because she
Mm,
felt like she was in a competitive defensive position of
Yeah.
having to defend herself. And when she's looking back at social media and people are making her feel like Lauren was doing a better job than her, and she sees that Lauren is not going away, it could have just been difficult for her to receive the message, or she may not have trusted the messenger, right? That whatever they were telling her was true because she didn't feel the same sense of security that she felt before she left. And it was different. The environment was, there was a new person. And to Stephanie's comment, would she have felt differently if it was a man instead of Lauren in that space?
that's a
Because
good question.
sometimes, yeah, like we
And see, so
feel
are
like
y'all
it can
getting
be
the
only one
questions?
of us. Yeah. So Stephanie said, I wondered if she would have felt that way if it were someone else or a male, right? It could have
Mm,
been, she could have responded differently potentially if it was a man because you may not feel as threatened. You're
right,
still
because
the only
she still would have
female,
been the only female.
Right.
right? Or if it was somebody that she hadn't selected that she may have felt like wasn't as good as her. Because I think they're equal. They have different um, things that they add, values that they add to the show, but they're both equally qualified, right? So she may have felt threatened by that too,
Mm-hmm.
you
I
know.
was I wanted to go back to your point, say about the concept of her potentially not have really having heard them, right? Because what I was listening to was, for example, her saying, "Well, nobody asked me how I was doing. Nobody
Hmm.
checked on me about the baby. Nope." And then as everyone was talking, everybody's like, "Well, but I did." And
Yeah.
she said, "Oh, well, yeah, you did." So she kind of
Or I didn't
affirmed that these
remember. Hmm.
people, right, they
Mm-hmm.
did try. So how much of this, like you said, was tied up in her emotionality and that confirmation bias, having people on social media saying, "Hey, what's going on?" and kind of feeding the fuel that
Mm-hmm.
built this monster around the social media
Hmm.
debate,
Hmm.
where it could have been a discussion. Because what I kept hearing was Envy saying, "We had a meeting though, and you didn't say
Yeah.
anything in the meeting,
Hmm.
and we just had a meeting. So are we holding this to create debate, to create some attention, to make yourself more relevant now that you're returning from having the baby and this is your lane and your arena, the social media side, versus Lauren was, again, former TMZ and producer side of things. So did you tap into where you felt like you had a bigger audience to steer the conversation to be in more support of what she envisioned, totally ignoring all the efforts that were made? Because what we don't know is how much discussion was had in advance of her returning.
Hmm.
If she didn't hear any of the congratulations and the support and the accolades and the asks of what she needed, how many other things did she miss in conversation?
Hmm. And the thing that I loved about his conversation was he was like, forget that. You're dope. You are great. Like you brought a different, element to the show. Like he was genuinely giving her props. Like, no, you're what we needed here on the Breakfast Club, right? So he to me seemed like an advocate for her. And I think Charlemagne is too. He just has a different approach to it. He's more trying to make light of it. Um, but I felt like Envy, I appreciated that he was supporting her
Yeah.
and
I
telling her,
think that
don't read the
conversation is an
comments.
interesting dynamic, if we even choose to go down that rabbit hole, but exploring the differences in the way that those two men presented, because I did see a lot of things like around the men making light of it and not really being attentive. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm a Charlemagne fan, so I know things about him. I listen to him outside of Breakfast Club. He struggles
Hmm.
with anxiety. And so, if you know much about him, he speaks often to the importance of advocacy around mental health. And he tells his story and the struggles that he has had in being responsive to the difficulties with anxiety and depressive symptoms and the such. And so, maybe it's the therapist side of me but I can see that what he was doing was responding, if I'm assuming, in fairness, from a space of angst, right? This is uncomfortable. I
Mm-hmm.
thought we handled this. This is kind of out of left field. How do we get out of this situation? So, I don't think he necessarily handled it the best way for her, but I think that that was
Hmm.
his own stress response. And if we're going to be gracious to her about her stress
Hmm.
response, can we not give him that same consideration? That was the vantage point that I had,
Hmm.
where it
That's
came
fair.
to the conversation that the men weren't being supportive. I think that was kind of short-sighted.
That's fair. So Stephanie said, I don't recall anyone checking on me while I was on maternity leave unless they wanted to know what date I was coming back, right? And
Which
a lot of people
Stephanie is
don't
that?
show
Is that
care.
Stephanie Foster?
Your your cousin.
I
Hmm.
checked on you, Stephanie Foster. I
She said
believe.
at work. She's talking about like the people at work.
Um, yeah, you know what? No one from my job checked on me either. And I was fine with
Mm-mm.
that. I was like, leave me alone. I understand they probably have a different relationship. I was like,
Yeah.
y'all don't have to call me till I get back.
Yeah.
So what are the
So
expectations there? And is that fair? Like, I don't expect my workplace people to do those. That's not your job. But I also don't go to work to make friends. I go to work to do my job. Well, I went to. So, like, and if friendship comes about afterwards, cool. But I don't have a standard that I expect you to feed into my personal
Mm-hmm.
life from a
Mhm,
professional space, because then our lines get blurred. And now I feel like I can check you like this because you upset me.
mhm,
I can check you like a friend
Mm-hmm.
versus keeping it professional, which I think is where a lot of these conversations where Jess seemingly went wrong was a lack of professionalism. So are we blurring the lines of what we're expecting for people that we work with and asking them to do the things that we would expect from our personal relationships?
mhm. Do you
Yeah.
feel like it was completely a lack of professionalism? Because I do feel like after I had my first son, I was crying for no reason. And it wasn't no reason. It could have been
Yeah.
postpartum depression. It could have been something hormonal. I don't know, right? But I would just cry because I felt like I wasn't doing something right, or I wasn't,
Mhm.
feeding them fast enough, or,
Yeah.
and that went on for a little while. And I was like, I am not myself, right? Could
Mhm.
some of that just be, I just had a baby, I'm hormonal. It's hard trying to get back to you after you've had a baby, on top of just the stress of, if you have another mental health component on top of that.
That gets to be a tough discussion because at what
Yeah.
point do we, from a business perspective, expect our employees to execute their duties and to manage those things themselves? I
Mm-hmm.
think that there's a difference between being compassionate and considerate and also kind of just opening the door for people to be exactly however with little to no bumper guards around
Yeah.
it, because I think that that becomes the discussion point for any. It's a slippery slope. Now we're having a discussion around how we're navigating mental health in the workplace. And
Mm-hmm.
so while we have to be considerate of those things, that does not mean that the mental health issue has a safe space in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess where I'm trying to go there is that where do the boundaries come into play, where
Mm-hmm.
I now have to protect my business and
Yeah.
you are responsible for managing your emotional and mental health.
Yeah.
That cannot and should not be the responsibility of the employer. And I've been in that situation where I've had team members that reported to me that had various mental health concerns. And while I can empathize, again, as a therapist, would you be okay with having your therapist having a mental health crisis at work? And because I'm supposed to be understanding of that, they now have traumatized you or hurt you or harmed you. I have a duty to
Mm-hmm.
manage the decorum, right? So I think that that's a tough discussion. While I can understand it as a mom, as a therapist, I can understand it. There's a responsibility that she has for
Mm-hmm.
making sure that if she's not well enough to do the job, that she then raises her hand and says, hey, I need a day or a week or a month or help or EAP or whatever we need to then advocate for. But I don't think that it's fair to place that at the feet of the people who now have to work with you. Because how
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
do they
Yeah.
respond to you? It's volatile.
Mm-hmm.
And see, and this is kind of that's going back to what I was saying earlier, that I feel like when women have children, we don't get enough time. We don't get
I
in.
agree.
We don't get it. Some people go back to work 6 weeks. That's not enough time
Absolutely.
for a woman to heal from all of the
Right.
trauma, physically and mentally, that she's been
Yes.
through. And so a lot of times we have babies and we're so concerned about feeding our kids and
Hmm.
taking care of our family that we have to get back to work because we don't have a choice,
Mm-hmm.
Right.
and that's that is what kills me about even her situation, because had she if we lived in an environment where it was safe to take the time without losing your job,
Right.
you know what I'm saying, she could have been in a place, she could have came back 6 months from now, right, and been healthy and ready to go, and but we're forced to go back to work after having a baby. 6 weeks, you ain't even healed,
Mm-hmm.
your cooch still like what.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
Yeah,
the sad
it
part.
is very sad. I
Yeah.
agree. I wish it was different.
No.
I do wish it was different. But did you guys hear the caller who said something about postpartum and she scoffed at it?
Oh
Yeah. I
So
no.
didn't I
it was
didn't
brought up,
Okay.
yeah.
and she was
Sometimes you may
like,
not even realize it,
she said something to the effect of, not making assumptions about what she's got going or something. There was a defense there, but much like
Mm.
everything else, there was a
The
defense.
defense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I felt
What?
like that was so going back to like the original question that we posed, right? Was the girl code broken?
Yeah.
Do we feel like there's any obligation for Black women in the workplace to pull each other to the side and have private conversations? Let's just say they didn't have a private conversation before. It sounded like they did, and maybe just didn't remember everything that they talked about. But what is that line, right? Because you said, Shalonvia, I'm not here to make friends. I'm not necessarily here competing with you, but I also, can be in my own lane doing my own thing. Do you feel like she had an obligation at all to keep having conversations or doing anything to try to help with her transition? Do you feel like, we should be supporting each other in a certain way?
I think those are two different questions. I think a sense of obligation
Mm-hmm.
versus should we support each other are two different
Yeah.
conversations, for sure. I think that we should support each other, period, for sure. And
Mm-hmm.
to me, support looks like also being able to say, hey, sis, this isn't the right pathway. Because if I care about you or I want you to win, I cannot just be a yes person to you. I
Mm,
cannot just be willing to accept whatever treatment you give me and cloak it in the concept of you're having a bad day or you're having a mental health concern or something to those to that degree. So I think that support, yes, but to keep having a conversation, when is enough? How many times do I broach this discussion with you? We've had team meetings that everybody acknowledged that they had, and she didn't raise the alarm. They had apparently some discussion inside of their own personal spaces where she said, hey, I saw you crying and I came to you. So there
Mm-hmm.
were spaces where she was saying,
Mm-hmm.
I tried to support. And she's like, well,
Right.
well, yeah, you did. Well, yeah, you did. And what she ended up saying was, I was angry and it was misplaced. I shouldn't have given it to you. So how much of that was then, if we're going to speak about the support piece, how much was Lauren responsible for consuming before she said enough was enough?
Yeah.
mm.
I think she
And
probably got there.
I
You
Lauren, from
see?
what I saw, she remained very
Yeah.
professional, and that's I applaud her because I think sometimes we can be quick to match people's energy and response, and sometimes we have to recognize, what this sister going through it. Let me take it now. Lauren stood up for herself, and she respectfully, in a respectful way, she was like, "You're not gonna talk crazy to me, right?" But I feel like she gave just her space to be frustrated without matching her energy, and I applaud her for that.
Yeah.
Because
Mhm.
sometimes that can escalate the situation unnecessarily, and sometimes it's just showing empathy and just giving people space to be frustrated. And I like, from what I saw. Now I didn't watch every single video, but from what I saw, I think she handled herself very well. At least in front of the camera, what they showed in that situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, and we didn't talk about it, but she also made mention of Jess having told her, I think on camera, to shut up, and that she took that,
Yeah.
So I guess that's kind of why I'm saying, at what point does she no longer have a responsibility to hold space for someone who's unwilling to rise to a greater level of professionalism in the workplace?
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
And
good.
and personally, I do have a sense of, if I'm working with someone that looks like me, I do have I would initially I start out with a sense of loyalty. Let's figure this thing out. I've had good work experience with other, not a whole lot, because I work supply chain and manufacturing. It's not a lot of women in leadership roles in my
Mhm.
business, unfortunately, but the women I have come across, it's like we have had each other's back. You know what I'm saying? Because
Mhm.
a lady who I was had a pleasure of working with when I first got to GE, she was like, "Look, let's stick together." And we would have conversations where we would really kind of prep each other so we could have a united front, so that when we went in front of leadership, we could make sure we had the right answers. And it was really a good feeling to have that vulnerability with somebody in that situation. So I can say that I've been fortunate, at least to have experienced that. So I
Mhm.
would like to think that if I worked with someone, a black female that was in the same position as someone that I worked with, I would like to think that we would have each other's back. I understand it doesn't always work out, but I think initially I would go into the situation with some sense of looking out for her
For
and
sure.
hoping that we could
Yeah.
look out for each other.
For sure.
Yeah. And one thing that, Stephanie said was like, is Jess even handling her business? Why does she feel threatened? But at the end of the day, everybody's replaceable too, right? So you can be on
Especially in that
vacation
industry.
in
For
that industry.
sure.
So you got to be careful with how you're moving.
Yeah.
And
Are
I'm
there
sorry,
any
but
other
telling somebody to
questions?
shut up and hush,
Yeah.
I'd have been like, you know what? That's the end of me trying to do anything. I got
Yeah.
your
I
shut
mean, and
up
I
and
guess that's why I
hush.
was saying that. Like, how much is this woman supposed to take before she
Yeah,
gets
not
to
not
say,
that.
I'm done.
Yeah, I would be
Sometimes we
done.
play people for fools, just because I'm being nice don't mean that I can't
Yeah,
shift.
Can't switch it
yeah,
up on you.
yeah.
Yeah, don't get confused.
So it sounded to me like we don't feel like the girl code was broken on Lauren's part. Just I don't
Oh,
know,
she
sis.
shattered it.
I
Yeah, I'm
don't know,
sorry. I
sis.
can't. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
Jess was way out of pocket to me.
yeah.
She was way out on so many fronts. And again, while I can understand, she's not even owning postpartum. So, I mean, we're being very gracious about this
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
giving her some little lobs here, but she's not even acknowledging any of those things as being a part of the problem. You know, she has she has a demeanor that feels a bit entitled and doesn't seem to be one where people can pour into her. When I was learning to be a therapist, my supervisor used to always say to us, don't be a full glass. I can't pour into you. And so if you can't be around other people who are willing to say, hey, sis, your
Hmm.
slip is showing. You, there's a better way to handle this. Let's have this conversation offline. Let's not go live and talk about this. But you don't want to
Yeah.
hear it as we go live. But but you don't want to hear it, then you make it difficult for people to have a workplace dynamic where you can continue to be in my presence because now you feel like a
Yeah.
liability. And so we talking about protecting bags. You can't mess up their bag.
Right.
You reckless. I don't know what you might do.
Yep.
Hmm.
That's good. Well, thank y'all, everybody, for joining.
Yes,
Tosh, you have
yes.
any last words?
No, ma'am.
All
I,
right.
well,
Thank
maybe I.
you.
No, I don't.
You
Thank y'all.
changed your mind.
Thank,
Speak your mind,
thank y'all
sis.
for joining.
Yes.
I
Thank
was gonna say a
y'all.
little
Thank
wrap up,
you.
but I think Shalonvia hit it, so we can end on that note. Yeah, thank you, everybody. Y'all have a good night.
Thank y'all.
All right.
Thanks,
Good night.
Shalonvia, for joining us
My
tonight.
pleasure.
Mhm.
Thank y'all for having me
Thank you,
again.
sis.
All right,
All right.
bye,
Bye.
everybody.